Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Neid, and I'm coming to you live from our new headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. For those of you who are unaware, my wife Olivia and I just recently made the move down to Charlotte from Ottawa, Ontario. So we're bringing MAP to the US. And I'm actually joined today by one of the key factors in making that possible. Polina Orlova. Polina was a client of Olivia's. I met her partner Nikita through Coach's Corner University very early on, and Polina's been working with us on the MAP brand and the strategy that we're using to grow the business. And I thought it would be a phenomenal opportunity to have her on the podcast to talk a little bit about branding, also feed into the marketing aspect and the amazing work that she does with her clients. So Polina, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the kind words. I didn't even realize that's the impact that I had. So that's great.
Well, I mean, a big part of the reason that we decided to move south was to be able to grow MAP. And the confidence that we have in our brand is a big reason why we were able to take that risk. And we've been working with you for about 6 months now, and it was clear, like I'll be honest, investing in this sort of thing was a bit challenging for me because and I'm sure it is for a lot of coaches or a lot of professionals, because the word brand is really butchered. It's used in so many ways that I'm coming to realize now that just are just kind of fluffy. It's like, oh, my personal brand. It's like I've come to realize that working with you, like, it doesn't mean anything when it comes out of most people's mouths. So with that in mind, I would love it if you would share a little bit about, your background, what got you interested in branding, and why you do what you do.
Sure. Well, yeah, so I come from a literary background, and I also have experience being a director of operations. So those two experiences kind of melded together into what I do now. And the reason why I do what I do is and you bring up a really key point about brand being fluffy, and I would make a case that even a more fluffy word is strategy, but I'll get to that.
Fair enough.
And yeah, so for me, I really see business as a kind of a creative manifestation of a person's vision for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, profit plays a large role in business. It's its lifeblood, and without it, a business dies. And because of that, I think a lot of business owners have a single objective, and that's profit. And that usually comes at a cost that is paid by other people. It's paid by communities, it's paid by the people within the organizations, it's paid by the environment, the future, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really wanted to, and at the same time, I was seeing around me a lot of truly visionary founders who see business, and you and Liv are two people like that, that see business as a vehicle for both personal growth and having a positive impact on the world. And they really have a purpose, a mission. They kind of want to leave a mark on the world, and I wanted to help amplify those voices because I'm a bit of a justice warrior, I guess. And having found that strength within myself of being able to kind of figure out the mess of ideas in someone's brain, uh, form it into a story, and then also back it up with action through my
Mm-hmm.
director of ops experience. That that's what led me to strategy, because that's kind of the definition. And what really drives me is kind of getting the piece of the pie, like helping business owners get their piece of the pie, because I want money to be in the hands of responsible people that are trying to do something positive in the world.
That resonates really deeply with me because one of the things that I felt was holding us back, and it's something that I see a lot of the coaches that I work with being held back by, is the ability to communicate what it is that they're trying to do. You mentioned like your business is a vehicle for personal development, but it's also a vehicle for achieving your vision of success, right? So you have your core values, you have who you are, and then your business is what takes you from who that person is to who ultimately you want to be. But putting into words what that business actually does, who they serve, how they serve them, and communicating it in a way where people actually understand, resonate, and listen to it is so hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think a part of what makes it really, really difficult, and I'm curious if you agree, is that a lot of the time, so I'll just open up with kind of like a definition of what strategy is, because we kind of touched on that, with brand being really fluffy and strategy being really, really fluffy. So strategy at its core is, like you said, it's identifying and becoming really, really crystal clear about what it is that you want to achieve in your business, and then building the foundation. And the way that I do it with my clients is, for me, it's deeply rooted in the founder's personal mission and the impact that they want to achieve in the world. So we build a foundation around that, and then I think the next step is the one that kind of gets overlooked. People forget to look at the challenges and the obstacles and identify those, like what is actually standing in the way of you achieving that business objective. And
Mhm.
once you've identified that, have you formulated a cohesive action plan to take you to from point A to point B, to kind of align all of your organizational resources in that singular direction of overcoming those obstacles and achieving that business objective. And so,
Mhm.
going back to your point of, like, a lot of the time it's very difficult to communicate it, I would argue that oftentimes it's quite easy to sit back and like write a vision statement, a mission statement. I think the difficulty comes in really understanding, where is that rooted? Why do you care about it? How does it manifest itself in the world? And are you walking the talk? Because I think a lot of people just write their vision statement, paste it
Mhm.
across their offices, and they're kind of like, well, memorize it and be inspired by it, and let's go. Like, let's hit those big goals. But I think the benefit of doing deep strategic work and figuring out what it is that you do is all about aligning every single element of your business and orienting it around that strategic goal. And then the communication and the messaging, that comes easy because you're not coming up with it on the spot. It kind of blossoms out of that foundation.
I'm kind of nodding my head and laughing because I literally just spoke with my mentorship group about this today, in that you have to be a product of your product.
Hmm.
And so, if I have the mission statement for our business that we're going to be raising the bar, that means that every day I need to be trying to improve myself. That means that every decision I make has to be in line with moving myself forward. And at the end of the day, I am my business. And everyone who works with Master Athletic Performance has to be Master Athletic Performance. They have to represent raising the bar for themselves, for their people, for their communities. And it's very like it in working with you, it's become very clear that we actually don't do a very good job communicating that publicly. People who know us know that. But publicly, I don't think we've done a great job communicating that. So maybe let's dive into, like, what are the first steps that you go into with a new client, or maybe let's be a little bit action oriented here. So we've got an audience of 6 people, probably, maybe, hopefully more, of the podcast. And what are some action steps that they can take to start looking at developing an actual brand identity?
That's such a good question. So, okay, I'll give my response, but then I'm really really curious to hear some of the challenges that you see with
Sure.
coaches. So, I think overall, I think it's something that we all struggle with, and absolutely, I think going back to what you said about map, you're in a very healthy position where, and this is what I mean, that the communication and the messaging then comes easy because with you we had to do some refinements, we had to do some fine tuning, but everything is coming together in such a nice way, and the communicating it is just kind of the icing on the cake. And it's difficult, obviously, finding the right words and
Hmm.
the right content. That's a skill in itself. But having that core and walking the talk is step one. And so, having said that, I think people that are just building out their brand identity, I would say start building the plane as you're flying it. So
Hmm.
put yourself out there, and before you even get stressed about your brand identity or your website or your content or your marketing, who are you actually serving? And what do
Yeah.
they like about you? I think that's step one. And then get really clear on that. Even if it's just 1, 2, 3 months that you're just out there talking to your clients, figuring out what you like, what you don't like. Like, I started my business as a copywriter. And
Hmm.
within the first large project that I had, I was like, wait, I actually am really, really good at the strategy part. And the copywriting is just something that comes as a result of that. So I completely repositioned myself. And had I built out a website back then and positioned myself as a copywriter, I would have had to redo the work. So
Mm.
just putting yourself out there and getting to know yourself, getting to know your client, and then really getting hyper specific about the client that you're serving. A lot of the time, I'll speak to clients and potential clients, and they'll come to me and they're like, Polina, like, I have no idea who my client is. All I know is this, and that. And they give me very, very specific, nuanced information.
Right.
And I'm like, what do you mean you do know your client? I think it's just a matter of trusting your gut and having the confidence in what you know.
Yeah, that was hard for me. I mean, coming from my background and looking at my roster of clients, every single one of them is different. So if you
Hmm.
would have asked me like, "Hey, create an avatar of your client." I'm like, it could be a 21-year-old power lifter, it could be a 55-year-old doctor who wants to be jacked, it could be a 33-year-old who's training for Air Force Special Forces. And then in our work together and through a lot of reflection on my part, it became very clear that my ideal client and Master Athletic Performance's ideal client had very little to do with demographic information.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's obvious to people. And this is something that I kind of want to highlight for you because it's something you do very well. And I think because you do it very well, you don't think it's that big of a deal. Or you like that client came to you and was like, I don't know who my ideal client is except for this, this, and this. You as the professional having the experience that you do, you're able to see through this information that they're presenting you and identify those granular pieces of information that you can extract out. But I think most of us are so in it that we can't pull ourselves back and look at that big picture. Um, what would you say to that person who really, really doesn't know who their ideal client is? Like, how do I go about figuring out the commonalities amongst the people that I coach?
Hmm. I'm so glad you asked this question.
Good.
Because yeah, it's one of my favorite things, and it's one of my favorite moments with clients when their eyes go like, oh, oh, hold on. That realization. uh so yeah, it's such a key point because I think people in the beginning, they tend to think, kind of go wide with the demographics,
Hmm.
And I would encourage people to go deep with the psychographics.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think that's something that's a bit of a fault of the marketing industry, because I think marketing and tech, everyone's talking about customer segments and how you have to speak to like a specific customer segment with like this piece of advertising, and then this piece of advertising speaking to a different one. And that's really relevant to tech companies that have products that cater to a lot of different customer segments and offer a lot of different types of solutions.
Hmm.
And these are established organizations with large marketing teams with a lot of
Capital.
access to data, and so they can get super nitty gritty about the specific customer segments, also because they've already built and established their brand, and now
Right.
they're kind of niching further in. So I think the first step is just not overthinking it, not overwhelming yourself with that, with the need to get hyper specific about the demographic customer segment profiles, and pulling yourself back and kind of asking what is it that is a common thread between all of these clients of mine. So, for example, if I have a client who's a new dad and he's struggling to make time for the gym because he has a new baby, and he's struggling with nutrition because he barely has time to eat. And then I have a competitor, a power lifter, who's about to do a national uh, meet. Like, how do I speak to both of those people? And I would encourage anyone listening to really peel back the layers. What is underneath the dad with the kid? What is their motivation to go to the gym? Why do they want to be there? What about the power lifter? Why does he or she, why do they want to improve themselves? Why do they want to compete at a national level? What is the deeper motivation there? And then go peel back the layers one by one until you get to the core, and get super specific about that core. Speak to that core deeper motivation throughout all of your messaging. Build your strategy around that person. And then as you grow, as you develop, as you start building out your offers and start building out your business, then you can segment that further to for the purpose of marketing.
Hmm.
But for the purpose of strategy, it's important to get super nitty gritty specific about the core of your customer, and what is it that unites, what is that red thread that runs through all of them. And it's really difficult because I think the first step also is identifying who isn't your ideal client. If I have a dad with the kid who's like super eager to make progress, I have a power lifter eager to make progress, and then maybe I have someone who um, is maybe training for a marathon. Maybe
Hmm.
I have to cut the person training for a marathon. Maybe they're not my ideal client. Maybe I'm focusing on strength training and or like.
Well, yeah, and that feeds back into what you were saying before about like knowing who you are too, right?
Mhm,
Because like if I'm not a running coach, well, then that automatically cuts out anyone who's interested in running,
exactly.
right? So, and then maybe you don't have any experience working with people with disordered eating behaviors. Well, that cuts out a lot of people right off the bat who are just not going to be your ideal clients. And I think that can't be understated, because the more people that you can weed out, the closer you can get to like what is that ideal client. And I think early on, my advice to people has always been coach as many people as you can
Mhm,
to see what it is that you like. Like as you mentioned, like try different things, get out, talk about your message, talk about what you do, and then as you start to see who's resonating with it, and then you have experience working with those people, now you can start to make better, more accurate decisions. It's just data acquisition, in my opinion, early on, because then the more data you have, the more layers that you have to peel back on.
yeah, absolutely. And having the confidence to say no, and approaching
Ooh.
that from a strategic position as well, because I think uh, as when we just start out our business, I think a lot of us deal with imposter syndrome, and a lot of us feel like maybe we're not qualified and we have to get more testimonials, we need to get more experience, we need to build out our business and like really uh, prove ourselves. And I think trusting that the first leap that you made in launching your business, you have done so much work upfront to get to this point. And there's
Mhm.
already value. And I think people who are all about personal and professional growth, I think we all feel like we're never good enough. So the goalposts are always going to shift forward. And I think it's really about trusting, like sitting with yourself and trusting what is the value that I can deliver now. Yes, I can learn more. I can educate myself more. I can gain more experience down the line. But this is my, for me at least, like I did have this moment where I was like, I'm doing this for the long run. I don't have to know everything tomorrow because then my business has essentially exhausted itself. Then there's no point for it anymore. Like I will always continue to grow and to learn, but I also have to trust that where I am right now is enough. And if I've defined for myself what it is that I want to accomplish with my business, and this person that's coming to me just doesn't resonate, that doesn't fit, I have to make that business decision to say, if I invest time and resources and money into this person, I am taking that away from my ideal client. And I have to trust that I have the skill set to find that ideal client for myself.
The way you just explained that was so simple, but that's a very hard decision to make as a young business owner who is potentially, strapped for cash. I agree wholeheartedly. I think people do not say no enough, and they don't say no to the right things. They might look at an opportunity and on the surface it looks terrible, but they don't realize that the easiest example here is like free speaking engagements. People will say no to speaking in front of a group of 50 people because they're not getting paid for it.
Hmm.
When the payment for that is the fact that you get 50 sets of eyes on you listening to what you say. That's a massive payment. Um, but I think it comes to a scarcity mindset. It's a pure scarcity mindset. It's like, if I don't take this client, I'm losing out on the monthly income and I'm going to be broke. Like, no, if you say no to that client, you will have more time available for the right client to say yes to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's a really challenging place. I also want, like, imposter syndrome is one of those things I have a really complicated relationship with, because I think it exists. I think that, there are these deep-seated feelings of inadequacy when you're faced with challenges. But in my experience, when you're feeling quote unquote imposter syndrome, usually you are unprepared. Like, and so you use that imposter syndrome to over prepare. If you're doing that, I think that's a fantastic use of those mental resources. But at the end of the day, if you're not confident in who you can serve, don't start a business. Like,
Yeah. And to your point of not being prepared, I wonder, like, I think you would agree. I think every single day, so like today, I don't know what day of the business of my business that I'm in, but I'm definitely not prepared for tomorrow, because tomorrow I choose to grow in my business, and so tomorrow I'll take on a challenge that I'm probably not prepared for. So I agree with you that yes, oftentimes when we feel that imposter syndrome, we're not prepared, and that could be true, but that's also okay. It's still
mhm.
okay to go into the opportunity and see the opportunity as the way to gain that experience. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree. So let's talk a little bit more. So we talked about the foundation, starting with core values. We talked about walking the walk. We talked about ideal client. How does your brand play into your your offers?
can you be a little more specific about that? What do you
Sure,
mean?
sure. So I have a training and nutrition coaching business. Obviously, I offer training and nutrition. But when I look at my brand as a whole, Master Athletic, and our mission statement of raising the bar, how do I go about matching the services that I offer to my brand and to my core values? And how do I communicate that with people?
Hmm. So, can I use kind of like a competitive strategy, competitive advantage as an example here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because and this is an example that um, and also for anyone listening, I think I know we all have questions about AI, so I think I have a bit of like a quick solution.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is um, and Paul, I have brought this example up with you just because I really love it. I think on one of our calls. So during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union, um, like between the two of them. So the United States made a strategic decision to not engage in a kind of retaliatory tit for tat kind of uh, competition with the Soviet Union. Instead, they recognized that they have a very and this I have to mention his name. Richard Rumelt is the author of a book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. So for anyone who wants to develop their strategy, that's a really good starting point.
Okay.
He brings up this example. So the U.S. recognized that they have an advantage in terms of their military technology, in terms of their sorry, they have a technological and an economical advantage over the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And so instead of kind of reacting to whatever the Soviet Union was doing, they decided to go all in and invest in this one single advantage and really um, like channel everything into their military innovation. And by doing that, they kind of exhausted the resources of the Soviet Union, and arguably this led to the fall of the Soviet Union. And the reason that I really love this example when looking at competitive strategy and in order to answer the question of how do I position my offers and how do I relate my brand through my offers, we have to understand the playing field. We have to understand what environment are we operating in. And a lot of the time, when
Mm,
people think competitive strategy, they think, okay, who am I competing with? And so, in the example of AI, if I'm approaching it from that position and I'm looking at my quote unquote competition and I'm seeing that everyone's jumping on the AI train, then I might think, oh well, I also should jump on the AI train because that's what everybody's doing, and I need to stay quote unquote competitive. But if
hmm
I'm rooted in my if I've built the strategic foundation for my brand, I know what I stand for, I know what I want to achieve long term, and I have confidence in that. And I'm channeling all of my resources, financial, time, personal, people resources. I'm channeling all of that in that single direction. And then I'm kind of doing what the US was doing. I'm looking around and I'm seeing, okay, everyone's jumping on the AI train. What are the flaws in that? Like, what are some of the weaknesses and some vulnerabilities in that? And I might spot that there's a lack of a human connection. There's
hmm
a lack of having someone to be accountable to. It can be really isolating. It can be really lonely. And when you fall off track, there's no one there to pick you up. And I might think, okay, I'm someone who's rooted in being in offering a high touch service. Like I'm going to use Master Athletic as an example.
Yeah.
High touch service, relationship uh, focused, human centered business. That's what I'm offering. So I'm not going to go and create an AI driven app, AI driven coaching app. I'm not going to replace myself with AI. But
hmm
instead, I see that all of these other guys are lacking in that human factor, are lacking in that high touch service delivery. So I'm going to dig my heels in and I'm going to invest even more into
hmm
that. And that's going to be my competitive advantage. And then I'll use AI as a way to maybe streamline my internal operations so that I can show up better for my clients. Maybe I'll use AI to kind of track my clients day to day so that I get a ping when something goes wrong and I can reach out and be like, hey, how can I assist you? How can I help you? So,
Hmm.
really focusing on what is your strategic advantage? What is it that you're rooted in? What is your competitive advantage? Is it sustainable long term? Like something also is like if your value proposition, if you're rewriting your value proposition every time new tech comes up, then you've not dug deep enough. And you
Right.
know this as an online coach, like when you started online coaching, the space was very open. Now it's quite saturated, and so like being an
Oh
online
my God.
online coach, yeah. uh, so yeah, like what are your thoughts on that?
I honestly couldn't agree more. So, the way that I conceptualize this with the coaches that I work with is they have to figure out what their superpower is.
Yes.
And I realized very early on in my career that being the smartest person in the room was not a superpower. In fact, it turned a lot of people off.
What do
I
you
was
mean
a
by that?
so I was very much an X's and O's science driven coach to the core, and I was so unforgiving with that I didn't even take the time to learn who I was coaching. We're talking very early on in my career. And when I left college strength and conditioning is when I kind of had that epiphany that I was coaching humans. And so all of my education and all of my learning and all of my practice came into how do I communicate with people better? How do I empathize? How do I learn to see the other person, how to listen to what they're saying for the purpose of understanding rather than responding? And in doing so, I realized that one of my superpowers is the way that I connect with people. And whether that's in education or that's in coaching, my ability to make those really deep, meaningful connections and relationships with those that I coach became the hallmark of what I offered. And that's always been at the core of master athletic performance. But my ability to actually communicate that publicly, I really wasn't able to do because number one, as you mentioned, when I first started coaching, my entire pro- like marketing strategy for my online coaching business up until about 2022 was just, hey, I'm Paul. I'm really fucking strong. No one had any ideas what was going on behind closed doors, right? But in the client communications, my Instagram was just my training. It was basically a glorified training log. And then as the industry grew and as online coaching became more proliferated, it became more saturated with people, but it didn't become more saturated with real coaches. And I still feel that way. I actually don't think the industry is saturated. It's saturated with a lot of people, but it's not saturated with a lot of coaches. And the way that I have conceptualized this in terms of my own marketing and the way that I speak about our business now is that we leverage our superpower as much as possible. And that's the way that we relate to people, the way that we form relationships, the way that we create meaningful connections. And you mentioned AI, which is something that I leverage quite heavily in my business, right? Like I leverage AI when it comes to productivity, even some writing tasks, but I will never use AI to coach my clients because that is what they're paying me for. They're paying me for that meaningful connection. And that's something that AI can never take from me, right? AI will never do that better than me.
I agree.
So I love that, diving into your superpower. You know what? I'm curious your thoughts on this because you've worked with a lot of different companies, both large and small. I think a lot of people are really scared to either admit what their superpower is or dive deep enough to figure it out.
I would absolutely agree. That's why I say that a big part of it is personal growth.
Okay.
And I think the reason why you've been able to get really, really clear on how you serve your clients, the story that you just told me, I absolutely love that journey. I think we can all learn a lot from it. And you've kind of outlined the journey of many business owners and entrepreneurs, I think. But the story that I heard was the story of your own personal growth, and
Oh yeah.
the growth of the business came almost as a benefit of that. And I think the first step is really, like you say, it's in figuring yourself out and having the courage to go there.
Hmm.
And like I'm a big advocate for mental health as well. And the person that I was at, I started my first business when I was 27. It was a small e-com store. And the person that I was back then, if I had any success with that business, I wouldn't have been able to manage it.
Hmm.
The person that I am now, after having a bit more real life experience and having gone to therapy, now I have a foundation within myself that can go out and stand my ground. And I think yeah, there's a, I don't think we talk about it enough, but as a founder, as a leader, as a business owner, um, really, really being firm and trusting in who you are and what you stand for, I think,
I totally
is,
agree.
yeah.
I think therapy should be a prerequisite to starting a business. I think that like when you register your business with CRA or the IRS, they should have a checkbox that says like, do you attend therapy? And if you don't check that box, you should be declined for your incorporation. But and like I've been very transparent with my own therapy journey. And truth be told, I really didn't start understanding the true humanity of coaching until I worked in disability rehab. I told this story on another podcast where like, I went from motherfucking kids in a weight room to trying to convince, Susan that it was okay for her to go outside. And I had to coach her through agoraphobia. Or I showed up at a young woman's house who was on disability because she had been assaulted and she wouldn't let me into her home to do an interview. Right. So like I was slapped in the face with humanity. And I brought that into my coaching and I just saw the results just absolutely take off. Um, and I think it can be very scary when you say your business will succeed as a proxy of your own personal growth. That is a massive responsibility on your part because it's all on your shoulders.
But I think it's a prerequisite to being a
I agree.
leader.
Yeah.
I'm sure you would agree, and I totally agree with you what you said earlier, that people, there are a lot of people. It's saturated with people, but not saturated with coaches. And I would argue that the business world is saturated with egos and people that locked out, and there's very, very little integrity, and people that put skin in the game, and it's actually their skin that they're putting in,
Yeah,
because a lot of the time it's people with big visions that depend on other people to execute it for them.
I totally agree. In that same breath, so we're talking about the market, okay? One of the things that you did with us was a SWOT analysis. So most people are familiar with a SWOT analysis being like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. They usually do it with their own business, but very seldom do they dive into it with other businesses. One thing that I often see is coaches will do their own kind of pseudo I will call it surface level SWOT analysis. But what ends up happening is they see all these companies crushing and they get immediately deflated and they get discouraged rather than being inspired and seeing what success could potentially look like. But even more so, not seeing the things that they don't want to do to get to that success. So when we did our SWOT analysis with you and we were going over the companies that we had chosen, the things that stuck out to me the most were, okay, these companies are really successful, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't align with me. And it actually served more so as a galvanizing point to where we were and what we were doing, rather than looking at it and saying, oh, I need to change this, or I need to optimize for this, and I need to do that and get that brand deal.
Hmm.
But I think that's where our mind tends to go first.
Hmm.
How do you
Well,
see the competitive analysis kind of framing?
well, before I answer,
Mhm.
how did you personally handle that? How did you detach yourself and kind of look at it objectively?
Um, so I'm 37 years old. And I'm very comfortable with who I am and what I do. I have a lot of
Hmm.
confidence in that. So I've never been one, even when I, scroll through Instagram, or, people will see, oh, I see a physique, like, oh man, I wish I could look like that. I look at a physique and I'm like, oh, I know I could work hard enough to have a physique like that, but maybe I'm not willing to make the same sacrifices or do the same things or engage in the same practices. I can look at it very objectively and I can detach from emotion, but that's only because I have such a deep understanding of who I am. And I think most people do lack that, especially younger, right? The difference between a 37-year-old Paul versus a 27-year-old Paul, you probably would not recognize who is sitting across the call from you. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Um, but it is, I mean, realistically, I just give people the same advice I wish I had when I was their age.
yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing is, I think, mm, how do I put this? So that's kind of why, part of the reason of why I do what I do is because it is very, very difficult to be objective about your own business, and so that's kind of where I come in. So
Mm-hmm.
for someone that, like you said, Paul, you're very, very clear about who you are, and for a lot of young entrepreneurs, they're not very clear on who they are, or if they kind of have a vague idea of what they want to accomplish in the world, but they don't really have the words for it. So really, again, like all comes back to strategy. Really figuring that out is step one, and um, but at the same time, like, you do have to, I think, put yourself out there and make those mistakes, and do and be that person, that young, kind of enthusiastic, wide-eyed person that just kind of sees something and chases after it, and then tests
Mm-hmm.
it, figures out that it doesn't work, and chases the other thing that is also a way to build, to gain clarity. It's just that, if you're only doing that, it might take you many years, and your business might not sustain and not have the and not survive those experiments. Um, so, going back to your question, this is why I really love doing the competitive SWATs, because when you're looking at your competitor, and you have to do it with due diligence, you have to try to be as unbiased and as objective, and when you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that your competitor is doing something really, really well, not ignoring it, but actually transferring it to your strength
Yes.
section and being very honest with yourself. And I also like to, again, going back to the point of not looking at people as competitors in a kind of retaliatory way, but almost looking at these competitors as case studies and just studying what other
Yeah.
people have done. And so, looking at the strength of your competitors, you're kind of holding a mirror up to yourself and saying, okay, what are they doing really, really well? Does that apply to me? Should I be doing that? Yes or no? If no, then that's totally fine. You don't need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that I can learn from what they're doing to implement it in my business? And just being really, really objective about it and kind of a little bit detached.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then with weaknesses, I love doing weaknesses, because that's a really cool way to get super, super objective about yourself. Because it's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult to be critical of ourselves, until we gain a certain level of emotional maturity. And like, if we are speaking
Yeah.
about very young people, they generally don't have that life experience yet to really have tested who they are as people.
Mm-hmm.
So holding that critical mirror up to yourself, and being like, oh, that's a weakness of this person, and actually I tend to be doing the same thing. And then you're gaining that upper hand because if you can fix it while your competitor continues to do what they're doing, then you have an advantage. And then looking at the landscape, like the environment within which your business operates, that's when we're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So when you're looking at your competitors' opportunities, that's a bit of a mind. I can't. I probably can't swear, but
You can swear.
it's a bit of a mind fuck because how can you think of your competitors' opportunities? And it's a good um, it's a good thing to think through because in thinking through your competitors' opportunities, you can actually beat them to it because you don't know if they're sitting there thinking about it. And similarly with threats, again, these are now you're not looking from an internal perspective of your business and yourself, but you're looking at the landscape. Like, what are the threats that are encroaching on our industry as a whole? And am I prepared to face them? So it's if you struggle to be objective, doing a competitor SWOT may be more effective than doing a SWOT of your own company.
Yeah, what I really enjoyed about going through this, like, and we went through it very, very thoroughly, was that I was looking at the strengths of these other companies and more so asking myself, okay, this is what they do really well. Is this something that we do really well? Yes or no? And then is this something that we should do really well? Yes or no? Cool. A lot more clarity. With the weaknesses, it was, all right, is there a competitive advantage that I can leverage here in the things that they do poorly and we do well? Or are some of their weaknesses the same as some of ours? With the opportunities and threats, that was one where it was a bit more challenging because some of the opportunities for other companies may be different from ours because they're going to be specific to that company's model. And then with the threats, I think we all face a lot of the similar threats, but you can look at the threats in relationship to their weaknesses and strengths and see if you are also set up to be threatened by those same things or if some of their threats are your opportunities. So
Absolutely.
it was like it wasn't necessarily a comparison as much as it was a contrasting, and that really helped me gain a lot of clarity. It was something that helped me tremendously. And then when you dial it back, right? Because we've talked about a number of levels. We've talked about core values. We've talked about identity. We've talked about strategy. We've talked about ideal client. Now we're talking about the brand and the offer stack, and then a competitive analysis. But these things are only as valuable as they can be when you're able to work backwards and clarify the steps prior. So as you go up the one step, okay, let's come back to core values. Okay, let's go up to the next step. Let's come back to core values. And what I'm coming to realize is like this was cool for us, and maybe it's a humble brag or whatever the kids are calling it these days. But at every step that we've gone through in our work with you, what I'm most proud of is the fact that our core values haven't changed.
Yeah. And
And
your sustained competitive advantage has not changed, I think, like you through
yeah,
the years of your company. I don't think we've shifted you really in any kind of way.
so, what would you say to that person who constantly feels like at every step of this branding exercise that they're shifting their core values or shifting their competitive advantage?
I'd say they've not dug deep enough.
Okay.
That they're attaching themselves to the low hanging fruit, be it because they haven't gained clarity on who they are and what they want, or they haven't gained clarity on what they want to achieve with their business and their brand. So I would say go back to the drawing board and ask yourself why. Why am I building this business? Why does it matter? What am I trying to achieve here?
I'm going to play devil's advocate and just kind of pose the question because I know that some of the listeners who have made it this far are going to be in a situation where they're likely questioning whether it's worth it to go back to the drawing board. For me, that's a clear like sunk cost idea where it's like I've dove so far into this and I have to stick with it and I have to make it work. But if I'm listening to you correctly, please give me your input. If you don't go back to the drawing board, you're fucked anyway.
Yeah. It's very costly if you don't again, this is why strategy, I think, is a bit of a fluffy word these days. I think it's a sexy word, like
Mhm.
strategy. It's like
Everything's sex. When you shake your shoulders and your head, everything becomes sexy, right?
um, but strategy really isn't sexy, and it's kind of the same as and I mean, the training and the gym is such a great analogy for everything in life.
Love
But
it. Yep.
you know how when we start training and like you have a client maybe who doesn't really know anything about fitness and they come in and they're like, you know what, I want to look jacked and I want to lose some weight, and you're like, okay, go start out with like your squat, deadlift, and bench. Get those figured out, get those done, and figure out your calories, like maybe like maintenance or whatever. And they're
Mhm.
like, what? That's it? And then they go off and buy some shit program that's like got them jumping through a bunch of different hoops, and it just feels like they're doing something, but it's
Yep.
actually less effective. And so I think strategy take has taken on so many different shapes, and but really at the core, it's what do you want to achieve, and what are the actions you're taking to that end. That's really it. And so when speaking about okay, like I have to go back to the drawing board, there's nothing. Sometimes going back to the drawing board, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, I'm actually on track here. I'm doing what I need to be doing. And I don't need to be distracted by all of this stuff. All of this
Yep.
other stuff is just fluff. It's superficial. I'm gonna maintain my position because I'm doing this long term. Or you go back to the drawing board and you're like, oh wow, I've really swayed super far from where I wanted to go. How do I reel it back in? How do I communicate the value of what I do? How do I don't know, for example, like one of the competitors that we looked at, they were speaking about how client centric they are, but then their website makes you go through pages and pages and pages of like services and offers and like trying to
Before you can
find the
actually
right
book a
coach.
call with somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like maybe you're like something like that. Like let's fix that to actually be client centric. Um, so going back to the drawing board doesn't mean sweeping everything under the rug and starting fresh. It's looking at what is evolving with you, what is no longer serving you, and where have you veered off the path so far that you're no longer aligned to your deeper why, like to the reason why you even started coaching in the first place.
Whenever I think about going back to the drawing board, it doesn't scare me because I know that I've done it once. Like you've already built something once. So an example would be, I started a business back in 2016, and at one point we had like 5,000 people on that email list. Unfortunately, that business didn't work out. Guess what? I still have 5,000 people's emails who I can tell about my next business. So even if I go back to the drawing board and I tear everything down and I start something new, think about all the resources that you've already built and accumulated that you can then leverage into that next opportunity. And let's not kid ourselves here. If you're a coach and you're going to be coaching, going back to the drawing board and revamping, you're still coaching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not going to be that drastically dissimilar. It might be a little bit more accurate. Your offer might be a little bit different. Um, but at the end of the day, you're still coaching. So I think people get stuck in the sunk cost because they're like, oh my God, I put everything into this. Like, yeah, you did, but you put it into the wrong places. So, like you said, you go back to the drawing board, you get yourself some clarity, and then boom, you're gonna get back to where you were and then further break through that glass ceiling that you were hitting before.
Yeah,
and it's going to take you a fraction of the time.
absolutely. Yeah, you have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, you don't go.
Like the analogy I always use is just getting everyone to row in the same direction. Like when you don't have that, uh, when you've not gone to the back to the drawing board and you don't have that direction, it's like it's almost like all of the pieces within your business and everything in your mind is pulling in different directions, and that's not you're not never gonna move forward. You're just gonna be
Yeah.
going around in circles. And like I think the sunk cost fallacy, I think we all get stuck in that
Oh
space
yeah,
sometimes. But
big
yeah,
time.
it's
Um, I perhaps undersold how big of a meathead you were, because one of the things that people might not know about Polina is that she trains her fucking ass off. And, in this last segment of the interview, I would love to ask, what are some things that you've learned through training that have helped you in your business?
oh my gosh. So here I would like to shout out Liv because she has supported me through the transition from my last place of employment, my unemployment, and starting my business. So the gym has given me, and I struggle with mental health. So the gym has given me confidence in that I can take consistent action long term, that I don't need to have a result tomorrow, that I can trust in the process, that I can learn to be present, that I can be engaged in my life, and that I can forgive myself that consistency isn't showing up at the gym 5 days a week. And if I fall off track, then I am no longer going to the gym like I had done before I met Liv. Like I've tried to get consistent 3 or 4 times before I finally did. And with Liv's help, I learned that consistency can look like, okay, something came up and for 2 weeks I couldn't train, but I'm going to, on week 3, I'm going to come back. And during
Mhm.
those 2 weeks, I'm still going to continue to show up for myself in other ways. So if I wasn't going to the gym, if I wasn't training, I wouldn't have this business. 100%.
I f- I feel the same way. Consistency for me, the best way I've ever described it is like doing most of the things right most of the time for a really long time. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with perfection. And when we draw back to business, it's like that's really all it takes to be successful in business. You have to do most of the things right most of the time and then just do it for a really long time. All these generational businesses are really old. Like they've been around forever.
Yeah.
And like the infinite game comes up to me. Like the infinite game is a phenomenal book, and essentially says that like your goal of business is to just keep doing business. You
Hmm.
can't win at business,
Yeah. I
and
love,
you can't win at fitness either.
yeah. Yeah, it's all a journey, it's all a process. And I love that. I love that you're bringing that up because we live in a world that just it's we live in such a fast-paced world, and obviously we all feel the pressure to go 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 go.
Mhm.
But there's something really beautiful about committing yourself to something long term and trusting that each day you're going to lay brick by brick by brick by brick, and you're going to build something strong, a legacy, like you mentioned, like these other businesses.
Yeah,
And yeah, live with it rather than rush it out and move on to the next thing.
absolutely. What's one album that you could listen to on repeat, no skips, while you're training for the rest of your life?
Oh my gosh. If you heard my training playlist, you would lose all respect for me. I listen to the trashiest Russian techno. And oh my gosh, no, I
Oh
actually do
wow.
have I do have one. I Okay, this is super geeky. I was very, very obsessed with the Matrix when I was little. Like I was in love with Neo to the point
Okay.
where when he hooked up with Trinity, I cried because I thought he was cheating on me.
Oh wow.
Like I was
Okay.
12. I was 12, but I was
Okay.
in love. And I was in love with him and I wanted to be him. I was waiting for the girl with the white rabbit to knock on my door and be like, "Let's go."
That's so funny.
So I listen to the Matrix soundtrack when
It's a
I train.
great soundtrack.
It's beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
What about you? What's yours?
uh, honestly, so I grew up. I don't know if you knew this, but I grew up playing basketball. I actually played college basketball, and so I was really big into hip hop. So there's a an album from a rapper from Brooklyn named Nas, and the album Illmatic.
Okay, I have to check it
If
out.
ever I'm like, if ever I'm like just like cruising in the car and I don't know what to listen to, I'll just throw that on and I'm good to go.
I will definitely listen. I'm making a note.
If you had one message that you could put on a billboard for everyone to see on the side of the highway, what would it be?
Trust yourself.
I love that one. I've had, listen, there's been so many billboard messages on this podcast, and like every single one, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No one has said anything stupid
Well, what's yours?
yet. Mine would actually be, um, I've gone back and forth on a few. Um, I would say put yourself first would be one of mine. Yeah,
Yeah. Why do you say that?
well, so we had a discussion last week in my mentorship group about prioritization, and I think we had 16 people in the call that day, and I asked them all what their top 5 priorities in life in order were, with the understanding that you couldn't say yes to anything below if it compromised what was above.
That's a good exercise.
So if you said yes to 5, but it meant 1 had to take a hit, you have to say no to it. And I was the only person who put myself first. No one else in the group put themselves first on their priorities list. And I spoke about it and I was like, listen, at the core of it, like let's take it's the most drastic example, okay? Let's take my marriage. My wife is the most important person in my world. I would literally do anything for my wife unless it meant compromising on my ethics and my values. Because most, like, let's use another drastic example. And this is something that happens in a lot of relationships, especially nowadays. Infidelity. If you put your wife first, let's say as a man, if I put my wife first and there was infidelity, there under no circumstances could I leave her. But I think most people, if you were to poll them, oh, if my wife cheated on me, I get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Well, then, so your priority is over her, and yeah, that's where my head goes.
I really love this. I've never thought about it this way, and I'm going to make a list of my own. But I really, really love the way that you frame that because it, it, speaking about relationships, and I'm thinking about Nikita, my partner,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, if I would want him to put himself first
Yep.
because I want him to realize his potential. I want him to achieve what he wishes to achieve in the world because that's in him putting himself first. That's me prioritizing him. If that makes sense,
Yep.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, you want to be in a partnership where your partner wants you to be the best
Yeah.
version of yourself.
And so keep in mind, I am the mentor in a business mentorship, and I ranked business the lowest of anyone on that list
Why?
because I'm first, my wife is second, the rest of my family is third, and I included the dogs in that.
Mhm.
And then my fitness was fourth, business was fifth.
That makes sense because if you yeah, you wouldn't compromise on your fitness, because then the whole thing would crumble. Then your business would crumble.
Exactly.
And I think for you as a person, everything that I know about you, I think fitness,
It's a
uh,
major pillar in my life.
yeah.
And the other thing too is like, if I'm a better person and putting myself first, I can be a better partner for my wife. If we are more stable, we can better support my family. I will never sacrifice my family's health for my own fitness. And then my business feeds off my fitness and how fulfilled I am in the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And I don't like, and this is where it comes in. If you can put those into order, but you can't set boundaries around them, this is where you start to lose alignment and lose fulfillment. So, are you willing to say no to your mother to prioritize your wife? Are you willing to say no to your business to make sure that you're getting your training in? I think most people in my position would put business above fitness. And that's why you have fat strength coaches, and it drives me fucking nuts. That's
And do we just
that's
end it there? Do we
my
just cut?
personal bias. Fuck fat strength coaches. Um, no, the last question I have for you. This is I asked this to all of my guests. If there was one guest that you would like to see me interview on my podcast, who would it be? But the caveat is that you have to help me get them on.
Oh my gosh.
It's a good one, eh?
And I have to
I'm
tell
gonna.
you
You
right now.
have to tell me right this minute.
Oh my gosh.
First person that comes to mind.
Honestly, I have to, because I think it would be a really, really interesting conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a person that's not from the fitness space,
Perfect.
and one that I admire because she has built the type of environment and the type of business that I wish to build. Like the way that she's established her team is just incredible.
Okay.
And this is the founder of Stinson, the company that Nikita uh,
Okay.
works at, and her name is Liana. And I would definitely love to hear a conversation between the two of you.
Yeah, I would love that. Polina, I will have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes, but I do want to give you a sincere thank you for joining me today. It was our first podcast in the new house, and I'm glad that you were the first guest because I think the work that you do is amazing. The way that you've helped us has been amazing, and I think more people should reach out to you. Shameless
Thank you so
plug.
much. Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, it's been an absolute honor, and it was such a pleasure talking to you. I'm not gonna lie, I was quite nervous, and
Oh, get out of here.
this is your for you. This is your first podcast in Charlotte, but for me, this is my first podcast ever,
Oh, you crushed it.
and
You
I'm
crushed
just
it.
I just mean so much that it was your podcast. So thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And we'll catch you on the next one.